Bogotá, September the 22nd, 1999. A government building, unremarkable. The kind of place people go to renew a card they have renewed a dozen times before. Fluorescent light, a number called, a line that moves slowly because it is Colombia, and lines always move slowly. A man walks up to a counter and hands over identification. The clerk barely looks up. The name on the card is not his. The face is close enough. He is 50 years old by now, though the papers say 60, though nobody checks that closely, though nobody has ever checked that closely with him, which by this point in his life, he has learned is the one rule of the world that has never once failed him. He gets his card. He walks out into the afternoon, into a city of 8 million people who pass him on the sidewalk without a second glance. And after that, nothing. No sighting, no body, no trial for what came before, and no trial for whatever, if anything, came after. A man who, by his own account, murdered more children than any human being in recorded history simply stops appearing in the record. Not in a prison cell, not in a grave anyone has ever found. Just gone. We are going to spend the next several hours with this man. We will tell you what has been proven in courtrooms, and we will tell you, plainly, every single time we are repeating only what he claimed in an interview, or a cell, or a moment of boasting. Those are two very different categories of fact, and by the time we reach the end of this series, you will understand exactly why the distance between them is the whole story. Why a country, or 3 countries, could know almost everything about a man and still let him disappear. Somewhere in that phrase, if anything came after, is the entire unanswered question at the center of this case, and we want to be honest with you about it from the very first minute, rather than pretending otherwise for the sake of a tidier story. This series does not end with a verdict. It does not end with a body identified, or a headstone, or a courtroom scene where the right person finally pays for what was done. We wish it did. It ends, instead, the way it actually ended, in the real world, for the real families of the real children this man took, with a shrug, a paper trail that goes cold, and a question mark where a period should be. We tell you this now, at the start, not to rob the story of its tension, but because we think you deserve to know what kind of story you are walking into. This is not a story about catching a monster. It is a story about how completely a system can fail to. So, how does a man walk into a government office in broad daylight and simply cease to exist afterward, with 3 countries' worth of unanswered questions trailing behind him? To understand that, we first have to go back, further than his crimes, further than his arrest, further even than his birth. We have to go back to a country that was already tearing itself apart, and a woman 3 months pregnant, waiting for news of a husband who was never coming home. Colombia, 1948. The country was entering a period historians would later name simply La Violencia, the violence, as though no more specific word were necessary, as though this particular decade of killing had earned the definite article all to itself, the way other nations reserve capital letters for their wars. It would run for the better part of 10 years. It would leave more than 200,000 people dead, in a country that did not yet have 12 million people to lose them from. Whole villages emptied overnight. Neighbors who had shared fences for a generation turned on each other over a single, brutally simple question. Which party, liberal or conservative, would hold the government that, out in the countryside, barely reached far enough to matter to anyone except as an excuse to kill? The spark, most historians agree, was the assassination of a popular political leader, Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, gunned down on a Bogotá street corner in April of that year. Within hours, the capital itself was burning, riots that would come to be known simply as the Bogotazo, and the fury that lit that fire did not stay contained to the capital, or to soldiers, or to battlefields with names anyone would remember. It moved into kitchens. It moved into small towns nobody outside Colombia has ever heard of, and has still never heard of. It moved, eventually, into a family in the department of Tolima. Somewhere in that department, a man named Medardo Reyes was killed in the fighting, shot, by most accounts, while defending a neighboring hamlet from a raid. Even this much is not entirely settled. His widow would later say he had led a local self-defense group aligned with the Liberal Party. Other accounts, written decades afterward, describe him instead as a member of the Conservatives. It is a small disagreement in the scheme of everything that follows, and we mention it not because it changes anything, but because it is the first of many places in this story where two people will describe the exact same man and arrive at two different histories. That is going to keep happening, again and again, all the way through to the very end. Remember it now, while it is still a small thing. Reyes left behind a wife, Benilda, and left her 3 months pregnant with their child. On the 8th of October, 1948, some records say the 5th, and again, we are not going to pretend that discrepancy doesn't exist. She gave birth to a boy, her 7th child. She would go on to have 13 in total, an entire household of children born into a country still killing itself. She named this one Pedro. Nobody in that room had any reason to think he was anything but one more mouth in a family that already had too many. By most accounts, Benilda López de Castañeda supported her large family doing laundry, and this detail recurs often enough across the record that it cannot simply be waved away, though it is only fair to say she herself would later dispute it, through sex work as well. Her son would grow up to describe her as cold, and at times violent toward him specifically. Decades later, sitting for a documentary crew inside her own home, an elderly Benilda would deny almost all of it. She would remember a polite little boy, a boy, she said, who wanted, of all things, to grow up and become a teacher. Sit with that for a moment. Both of these things may be true at once. A mother can be remembered two completely different ways by two people who stood in the very same kitchen. We are not going to pretend to settle which version is correct, because the honest answer is that nobody outside that house ever really knew, and everybody inside it is now either dead or has spent 50 years justifying themselves to a camera. We will simply tell you both versions every time they diverge, and let you sit with the fact that somewhere between them is a small boy nobody in a position of power ever thought to ask. What is not disputed by anyone in any version, sometime in his childhood, the record gives his age as anywhere from 8 years old to 10, depending on the source. Pedro López was put out of his mother's house and did not go back. His own account is direct and unflattering to himself. He says she caught him touching one of his younger sisters and threw him into the street rather than deal with what that meant inside her own home. Her account, given many years later, is much simpler. She says he ran away. We will say this once as clearly as we can, and then we are going to move forward without relitigating it every few minutes. Whichever version is true, a small child ended up alone on the streets of a South American capital city in the middle of the 20th century, and absolutely nothing about what came next was designed to help him find his way back. He became what Colombians of that era called a gamín, one of the thousands of homeless children who slept in doorways and stairwells across Bogotá, who begged when begging worked and stole when it didn't, who formed loose, shifting little gangs for a kind of protection that was never quite protection enough. It was, and in some ways still is, an entire subculture with its own rules and its own economy. Built by children, the formal city had simply stopped counting. He learned, as most gamins eventually learned, to smoke basuco, the cheap, impure cocaine paste that has burned through generations of Bogotá's poorest and youngest, before him and after him. He learned that a policeman's job, where street children were concerned, was less to protect them than to periodically sweep them out of view of anyone who mattered. He learned, in other words, exactly how little the world above the pavement thought he was worth. Here is where the record gets harder to look at directly, and where we are going to establish a practice we will return to more than once across this series. When something happened that was genuinely terrible, we will tell you plainly that it happened, and we will not narrate it beyond what you need in order to understand its weight. This is not squeamishness. It is respect for the people it happened to and for you. While he was living on the street, a stranger approached the boy and offered him something every gamin wanted more than food: a bed, a roof, somewhere that was not the pavement. The man took him instead to an abandoned building and sexually assaulted him. We do not know how many times. We do not know his exact age. The accounts place it somewhere around this same period, when he was still small enough that around 10 years old is the most precise anyone has ever managed to be. We are not going to guess further than the record allows, and we are not going to fill in the details the record leaves out. It happened. That is what you need to carry forward with you. Not long after, by some accounts, that same year, an elderly American couple, missionaries or expatriates depending on which telling you read, found the boy on the street and did something almost nobody else in his life had done for him up to that point. They took him somewhere safe, on purpose, and they meant for it to last. They enrolled him in a school for orphans. For a while, it seems, something almost ordinary happened to Pedro López. He had a bed that was his. He had lessons. He had, by his own account and by his mother's, an ambition that sounded like anyone else's child's ambition. That business about wanting to be a teacher surfaces again here, in some tellings, as though for one brief window in his life, a different future was genuinely within reach of him. It is worth pausing on that, because it is easy, telling a story like this one, to make a killer sound inevitable from the cradle onward. He was not inevitable. For a short time, he was simply a boy in a school uniform who wanted to teach other children someday. It did not last. Around the age of 12, a teacher at that same school, a man entrusted specifically with his care in the one institution that had actually tried to help him, molested him. He ran away again, and this time it was for good. Whatever door had opened for him closed, and so far as the record shows, it never opened again in quite that way. We want to stop here before we go any further and tell you plainly what this episode is actually about, because we are not going to say it again in quite these terms, and we do not want you to mistake what follows for something it is not. This is not a story about how abuse creates monsters. That framing is too simple, and it is also, statistically, not true. The overwhelming majority of children who survive exactly what Pedro López survived do not go on to do what Pedro López did. We are not in the business of handing you an excuse dressed up as an explanation, and we would ask you not to accept one if it were offered. What this is, instead, is a story about a sequence of adults a mother, a stranger, a teacher, an entire indifferent state, who each, in turn, had a chance to be the adult a small boy badly needed, and who each, in a slightly different way, failed him completely. And it is, at the very same time, unavoidably, becoming the story of what that same boy would go on to do, without hesitation, without mercy, and for years without consequence, to dozens upon dozens of other children who never received so much as the one good year he was given at that orphan school, before it too was taken from him. Both things are true at once. Neither one cancels the other out. We are going to ask you to hold both of them all the way through and keep listening. By his late teens, Lopez was living the way most gamins who survived long enough to reach adulthood tended to live, drifting in and out of petty crime, in and out of exactly the kind of trouble that eventually catches up with everyone who lives that way for long enough. Sometime around the age of 18 to 21, the sources genuinely disagree here, and we are not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a clean sentence. He was arrested for stealing a car and sent to prison. What happened to him next is one of the few episodes from his early life that multiple independent sources describe the same way. Very likely because, for once in his life, there was an official record attached to it. On his second day in custody, a group of older inmates, most accounts say 4, gang raped him. We are not going to narrate that beyond stating the fact of it. You already have enough by now to understand what it means for a man who had already survived one sexual assault by a stranger on the street, and a second by a teacher entrusted with his care, to walk into a state prison and have it happen to him for a third time, this time inside the very institution that existed, at least on paper, to hold him accountable and keep him safe from exactly this. He did not report it. There would have been little point. Instead, over roughly the next 2 weeks, Pedro López fashioned a crude knife out of whatever a Colombian prison cell offers a resourceful, furious 18-year-old, and he used it. He killed 3 of the men involved. Say that number again, slowly, because it matters for absolutely everything that follows in this series. 3 human beings dead by the hand of a man who had not yet turned 21. And here's the detail that should unsettle you more than the killing itself. Prison authorities investigated and ruled it self-defense. Some accounts say he received no additional punishment whatsoever. Others say a token 2 years were tacked on to his existing sentence, a rounding error, in a system that had just watched a teenager kill 3 grown men over the course of 2 weeks, and apparently decided the paperwork barely needed adjusting to reflect it. Pedro López had now killed 3 human beings, at close range, with a weapon he built with his own hands. And the one institution in his entire life whose specific job it was to correct and contain him had, in effect, shrugged and moved on. He was, by every account available to us, a model prisoner for the remainder of his sentence. Quiet, compliant, exactly the kind of inmate a warden eventually stops thinking about at all. And then, his time served, the gate opened, and Pedro Alonso López walked back out into South America, a free man, somewhere around 21 years old, carrying a childhood of abuse that no adult had ever once meaningfully addressed. 3 killings that no institution had ever meaningfully punished. And, though not a single person watching him walk through that gate had any way of knowing it yet, an appetite that had already begun to take a very specific and very terrible shape. Hold on to this moment, because it is the first of several. A young Pedro López did something unforgivable, and the system in front of him responded with a shrug. That is not the last time that will happen in this story. It is not even close to the last time. It will happen again in a Peruvian jungle, in front of witnesses who wanted him dead and were talked out of it. It will happen in Ecuador, where a maximum sentence would turn out to mean something closer to a decade and a half. It will happen in Colombia, in a psychiatric hospital, and finally, at that registry counter in Bogotá where we began. Every single time, a door that should have closed stayed open just wide enough for him to walk through it again. This first shrug from a prison official in his early 20s is the smallest of them. It will not be the smallest thing at stake for very much longer. He did not go home. There was no home left to go to. He went instead to Peru, to the mountains and the market towns of the Andes, where he would begin doing, deliberately and for years, the thing his own life had only ever been done to him. That is where this story stops being merely a tragedy and becomes something else entirely. That is where we are going to pick up next time.